от сигарет кружится, как тези споры, тонкий английский лед, под ним кипящее море. Рюмка на полпальца, где-то усталая печень, но он опять рвется в зал, как будто последняя встреча. Жесткое вино разума обжигает, но будет спящих каждое слово, как выстрел в зал, и не осталось священных щелей, где бы он тихо промолчал. Где-то в Багдаде жара тонет в сарказме и прозе. Он пишет, как режет ножом, по мифам на белой бумаге. В студиях, в старых барах, в маленьких залах кампусов он ставит под роспись богов и веру сдает под авансом. Жесткое вино разума обжигает, но будет спящих каждое слово, как выстрел в зал, и не осталось священных щелей, где бы он тихо промолчал. Тело слабеет, голос сипит, но шутка выходит точнее. Он поднимает стакан и говорит: поверим, кого соберет скорее. Публика держит дыхание, он не дает ей надежд, только упрямая да к сомнению и пути. И следуй смерть. Жестокое разума обжигает, но будет спящий каждое слово, как выстрел в зал, и не осталось священных щелей, где бы он тихо промолчал.
This land was made for you and me. That includes our poor and hungry. If you want to join the fight, come stand with us on the right side of history. Divided we stand, united we fall. In the belly of the beast, fighting fascists, the tyrants.
Oh, we're already here.
Gary said, you've got to center me. So go ahead and center me.
All right. Here. Okay. Okay, hold on. Let me
They're
do it
not.
the old way.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
No, that was the old thing. I can easily put us back to.
No, I just meant. I mean, I try to move and it still doesn't. So I don't know what's going on.
There we go. Anyway, good evening,
No, no,
everybody.
Gary said this is not right. You have to be on the left side. And then you actually do it. There you go. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I have been the left side.
No, you're not. You're
Well,
on the right
it's the
side.
left, in my perspective, like, if you turn around.
But it's not the people's perspective. Put yourself on the left.
You can't just do it. It doesn't, like, let me see if I can. Hold on.
We've always had it that way.
Well, no, it just, it jumbles each time. And
Yeah, that's fine. Do it. I don't care. Let's get on.
I don't care either. Let me see. Add left.
No, that's 3. Although it is me twice, but it's still
It
me
is
on the
you.
left.
So, okay.
Just go on the way it was, Brian. It's fine.
All right, fuck it. All right, excuse the language, but it's for free, folks. So, anyway, this is Divided We Stand, and it is, August the 16th. So we are moving toward the school year, which I will not be participating in, which is really, really nice. Of course, my colleague Dave won't be participating. He hasn't done that for quite a long time himself. So you're looking at 2 semi-retired people, because we are keeping busy, I suppose. And this is Divided We Stand on YouTube. We are not a monetized channel, which means you get premium YouTube for free, at least for this show. No adverts. Don't worry about that. And you can actually have your say when we have a show. You know, I have to admit that I watch some really good channels, but they're so popular, like Hal Sparks. And there must be, 15 comments every 3 seconds, so you really can't get a comment in. But on this channel, it's quite likely that you'll be heard. So, and nothing against Hal Sparks. It's just if you're watching a show, you won't be able to really interact in any kind of real way.
Well, one of the shows has a very successful host, and the other one, the main host.
Right. I am not a Hal Sparks. I don't pretend to have that type of talent and knowledge. He's tremendous, but but we don't ask for money, and Hal does ask for some coffee, but that's up to him. And he's a famous. I could say he's a famous Hollywood star. He was in a couple shows on HBO or whatever it was. I forget. If you're out there, you can tell me. But anyway, no, I'm just a teacher or a former teacher, so you get it for free.
Yeah, what are you now?
What am I now? I'm retired, and I'm gonna have whatever I intend to do will be incognito. You call me Mr. Incognito.
Please, Brian. You know you're not supposed to use that word. You just said you're retarded, and that's a word we don't use anymore. You could say you are lacking in mental acuity.
Now you're stealing Borat shit here. This isn't cool. I'm gonna get you for plagiarism and all the rest of that shit.
What do you do?
All right, listen. Let's remind everybody that there is a Facebook group page, and we are constantly growing, not by leaps and bounds, but we are growing. We have well over 1,600, so we're pushing to 1,700. And I wonder, and I guess you do too, Dave, is at some point does it get so popular that all of a sudden it, explodes and becomes super popular? I don't know. I guess it's up to Zuckerberg. It'll be up to him on how the algorithm works, or somebody it'll be up to. But right now we're quite happy where we are, so that is nice. So yes, and we ask that you interact with us because we essentially don't have a show. Dave and I can talk to each other over the phone, and we can avoid having this show if we were just talking to each other. But we need your input. In fact, a lot of times we need your input because I don't want to go onto AI and have to type everything in. We need your help, and we're just normal people, I think. Although Dave might say that's a little bit of a question mark there with me, but who knows? So Dave, how are you doing?
Well, I'm back from a week on the road. I'm laughing. I'm not complaining. It was an interesting return of sorts. Our best friends from Virginia had never been to the Jersey Shore. So we kind of did a trip around 3 things, taking them to the Jersey Shore. And then we moved on to and I highly recommend this next one if you live anywhere near New Jersey. It opened in June, end of June. Bruce Springsteen Center for American Music on the campus of Monmouth University, formerly known as Monmouth College. They did an excellent job. They really did. It's a two-story complex. The first floor is dedicated to all things American music. Second floor is dedicated to all things Bruce.
Is he from Monmouth? Is he from Monmouth?
Well, yeah, he's from that area. In fact, if I remember my facts correctly, I think he maybe even attended. It was either Monmouth. It was either junior college in that area or Monmouth when it was Monmouth College for like a semester, and that was it. But Monmouth, of course, is near Long Branch, and Long Branch. It's in Long Branch, and then Long Branch is near Asbury Park, and that would be the place most associated. And then, of course, he grew up in Freehold. It was, and then we went on because our friends had never been to the Woodstock Museum at Bethel Woods, so that was fun. Judy and I've been there. I guess this is our third time. But one of the things that kind of actually ties into the show and politics from both, obviously, not obviously, but the first non-permanent, temporary exhibit at the Bruce Springsteen Center is on the history of protest music, which was, obviously we're back in a time when protest is vital. We've got 34% of Americans that are on the wrong track, basically. We have the worst president, maybe in galactic history, but definitely in American history. So it's a very appropriate. And Mr. Springsteen is one. Of course, Mr. Trump responds in the terms of Trumpian language. So we have that. But then I think the more interesting story, or as interesting a story is coming out of the Bethel Museum at Woodstock. They are in the process, they've kind of dotted their I's and crossed their T's. They're actually going to establish in this coming year a Center for Peace, sort of rivaling the, maybe not rivaling because of course it's Jimmy Carter, but sort of, yes, Veg, absolutely. You could trace it. You can trace it if you want a quick trace of just a few people. Woody Guthrie to Pete Seeger to Bruce Springsteen. That's kind of almost like the grandfather, the father, and the son. Many names in there also. But the Peace Center, as I say, the Carter Peace Center has the oomph of having a former president behind them. And when we lived in Atlanta, I spent some time there, and they're really doing some good things. And now Woodstock. Because what is Woodstock? It's 3 days of peace, love, music, unity, and so they've got the music part down. They've got the part down about the '60s and how it led to that, and now they want to establish a second kind of focus, which would be on peace. So it'll be interesting to see. I have some people there I know who are working with it, including the director. So to kind of follow that. I'll be interested to see how that turns out. Now, one of the things that makes it worthwhile to visit, the volunteer docents at both places, all of them have some kind of tie to what they're doing. At the Springsteen Center, some kind of direct tie to Bruce, E Street, something. And then at the Woodstock Museum, some kind of tie to Woodstock. And if you want to relive a past that you didn't probably go to, they opened up a couple years ago, they opened up a camping site at Woodstock. Of course, you're not going to be with, depending on the numbers, the lowest number is 300,000. The highest number is 500,000 estimated people in or around Woodstock. You're not going to have that. And if you're not a camper, they do have a couple glamping sites, which is, I said, what the hell is glamping at one point? And I learned that it's glamour camping. But all of that is pretty much in the past. And here we deal with the president a lot. And that president involves what historians, 200 of them, agreed in consensus, involves the worst president in United States history. In fact, if you do it by presidency rather than person, it's the worst now I'm doing it. The worst two presidents in American history. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us if you, right. But I think I will say this. When you sit back, and I encourage all of you to do this, sit back and look how much worse it is now. And with just what went on when he was the 45th president, it was bad, and he was the bottom of the barrel. And now he's broken out of the bottom, and he's somewhere way below the bottom of the barrel. If there's such a thing. Mr. Cool Anthony says, Neil Young, there's another one who's been very active in protest.
Is Bobby Darin saying? I know he's saying if I were a carpenter. I know you're a big fan of Bobby Darin.
Well, as Gary said there, Bobby Darin did do If I Were a Carpenter, but here's the tie into Woodstock. It was written by Tim Hardin, a folk singer, along with Dylan and Phil Oakes and Richie Havens during that period. And
isn't it amazing, by the way, Dave, that Bobby Darin was hit in a certain time period, and then all of a sudden he fell off the cliff, and he had this one song that hit, and then for that moment, he's like a one-hit wonder in a different generation.
Well, again, if anybody wants to rush out and get my book, which, by the way, you can't get in print right now, but it's still on Kindle. It's going to get a reprinting sometime in the near future. We're debating on the money involved in that. But it's kind of, if you're going to talk about, and it's always legitimate to talk about music, because music is associated with protest. Protest is associated with power, and a power comes from a president. Very few presidents have not been protested, some more than others. The two biggest protests, get it out right, protests launched in my lifetime were against Richard Nixon, of course, and now Donald Trump. Different times, different ways to protest. We might talk a little bit more about that tonight. But as I say, the tie-in with Woodstock, that Bobby Darin, and the song you mentioned, If I Were a Carpenter, which is, I really think is a neat song.
It was a good song. It made it, so it was.
It was written by Martin. But if you really look at music, there's many ways to say. Nobody knows no one can agree on, I should say. No one can agree on what was the first rock and roll record. There's suggestions that it actually occurred in 1937. There's a record out that some people say, but anyway, but if you take it as basis as I do for when I write about it, I say that rock and roll began in 1952, not with my birth, although that was the year of my birth. It was a thing called the Moondog Coronation. It was held in Cleveland. It was put on by a DJ who probably was the biggest DJ in rock and roll history, just like George Washington is the most significant president. Some people think he was the first. Alan Freed. And it did set kind of an interesting thing. I think where they held it, I think it had a capacity to seat 4,500, maybe 20,000 people showed up. They had a riot, very rock and roll, right? And only one group ended up performing. So from 52 to 59, that's kind of what I say is the birth of rock and roll. Well, of course, I go through the Elvis and Chuck Berry period and all that. And then in 59, pretty much things of Don McLean, the things about, the day the music died. But it was interesting in 59. If you look at all the great rock and roll stars, Buddy Holly dead on that plane, Chuck Berry in prison for a trumped up charge, but for transporting a 16-year-old girl for immoral purposes across state lines. Little Richard, in one of his moments, I'm going to change my life, left rock and roll music to become a minister. And Jerry Lee Lewis, married his 13-year-old cousin. So he was persona grata. And it left, very few of the pioneers there. 1960, Kennedy comes in, and it realized 1960 to 63 was, many people feel, the worst time in music. I don't know if I agree, because a lot of things were behind the scene. So, but basically, that's the period of the Bobby Darins, the Fabians, the teen idols, as we say. Some people like Ricky Nelson moving.
You never really got into that, did you, Dave?
Right.
You know, the
That period of
heartthrob.
time.
Yeah. I mean, I know you were around at the time, but
No, no,
I don't see you
you
as
know,
that type of guy.
no. That period. But what I didn't realize, and as you go back into it, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes. Uh, Brian Wilson formed the Beach Boys, and that's a very significant
The
moment.
roots of what you liked was in that. Period.
Right. You had Motown forming, and a lot of people don't know this. So tonight we'll just start with this a little bit. Motown was the founder of Motown was Berry Gordy, and he wanted to bring black music to white America. And some people think he compromised too much for that. But what I found most interesting, he was a worker at one of the car plants in Detroit, and he actually modeled Motown on the assembly line that he worked on in cars, and it really was an assembly line thing. You had a few other artists that later played Del Shannon. But anyway, then of course '64, all heck breaks loose as the Beatles come over here on and debut in America.
They just added one of your other favorites.
Pardon me?
Gary just added one of your favorites.
Pat Boone, yes. No,
See that
actually, no. For anybody who doesn't know who Pat Boone is, he's the antithesis of rock in that period. Today, Mr. Boone would probably be a trumper, I would assume. Appealed to conservative America, and a lot of stories about artists like Pat Boone would cover Little Richard. Somebody else would cover Chuck Berry, and they would play the white version rather than the black version. Got Cool Anthony with two of the greatest blues players ever, B.B. King and Muddy Waters, putting up there.
But two entirely different blues players, which is interesting.
Very, and the blues is a very involved moment. And you actually have many different. I mean, you have the Mississippi Delta blues, you have the Chicago Electric blues. I mean, we put it under one category, but was very different. But what I think is interesting when you talk about kind of a world perspective, the Beatles and the British invasion brought American tunes back, and so that wasn't a complete generation, but that they picked up with Chuck Berry, they picked up with Jerry Lee Lewis, they picked up with the Everly Brothers, and all of a sudden, this forgotten music during this period of JFK returned, and then again all that leads up to what we know today as classic rock, and there we are. So how does this tie into this particular show? Well, there were two periods when protest music really surged. The first was anti-nuclear proliferation, and you got artists like we said before, Woody Guthrie singing about the people and the workers. You had Pete Seeger doing some great, in fact, I think one of the greatest protest songs in my estimation ever was his anti-war classic, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? I just think that's just really, if you follow that song, you say, okay, war's not a good thing. And then led up to such artists as Peter, Paul, and Mary, who would take some of those hits and put them on the radio and I'm still trying to figure out, any help out here, people, is Puff the Magic Dragon about marijuana or not? It is, you can see it in there, or is that a stretch?
It's a stretch.
No, I don't know. Puff the Magic Dragon is what got it started, talking about puffing. And there's always been,
well, I know that phrase chasing the dragon, but that's not pot.
Yeah, but what happens, Brian, a lot of times with music.
And when Steely Dan wrote that, they meant that with chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Not pot.
But again, sometimes that's the point. Words go through, what should I say, different meanings, subscribe to it. And so, the argument is, well, maybe that's after the fact. We did use Puff. We did use Magic Dragon in drugs. Not there. And that was big in colleges, which actually separated. That was a big difference. You could be a folkie or you could be a rock and roll. But usually you weren't both. Intellectuals, college students, folk music was big. In fact, the first music program, even before Shindig and Hullabaloo and all those shows, was one called Hootenanny, which featured all folk artists. And folk artists have continued to play a role in that. Although folk is not anywhere near as big, as it was. But then rock and roll, which eventually became rock, which now we call classic rock, that was another big period of protest songs, and that was aimed, primarily at, well, the three big topics in my lifetime: civil rights, not so much workings, but there were civil rights, politics, particularly Richard Nixon, and anti-nuclear moved kind of into the anti-war movement. And it's still being played. And that leads directly to Bruce Springsteen and Neil Young, which was mentioned earlier. They are doing shows and songs now. Bruce's last tour was basically, you could call it the Go Fuck Yourself tour of Donald Trump. Go fuck yourself, Trump. And he made, I saw him here in DC, and that was kind of, he actually said, we would say, let's let Trump hear it at the White House. And, he's playing about 3, maybe 3.5 miles from the White House. So, music is part of pop culture. Cool Breeze, Anthony, direct from Texas, brings up bluegrass. That's more associated with country. And country, of course, if you look at it.
Although you could say, it is country, but it's associated with country, but it's really like Appalachian, stuff.
It is, yes, and that's where it comes out of. In fact, little known fact, DC fact here. At one point, Washington, D.C. was considered the capital of bluegrass. The reason being its closeness to West Virginia, and the radio signals from D.C. could reach into the Appalachians begin there. Didn't reach Tennessee, also big there. But basically, country music throughout its history has also been bifurcated or whatever, split in two. You have outlaw country, which was always about the people, but country was a lot of patriotism. In fact, Mr. Trump's favorite artist, he says, is Lee Greenwood. Lee Greenwood, sings all patriotic songs. I
can't listen to more than one bar, and I've got to turn it off. And not because of the pages, I just can't stand Lee Greenwood. I probably shouldn't add that, but I just can't.
No, well, it's true. And then on one hand you have Lee Greenwood and that type. On the other hand, you have Willie Nelson, who's been an outlaw all his life, pretty much. And his songs are not overtly political, but you certainly know where he stands. You've got, and then things morph again. Here's an interesting thing I didn't know. And I was kind of fascinated to see this. Last week, for the first time in recorded history, the top 5 songs on the Billboard chart, now not the country chart, but their overall, they put all the charts together. Brian, the first 5 songs were country songs. Now, what does that mean? I think it means this. You really don't hear...
It goes the music industry anyway.
Well, the rock, rock... You can make a strong argument that what we call rock and roll rock has always been music for the young. And right now for white America, there's not a whole lot going on in new music. There's K-pop.
I didn't know that agreement, although I wouldn't doubt it, being
oh, yeah. Guy. No, Judy's absolutely right. Lee, even if he didn't say it, it's there, right? And, a lot of the Southern groups, sometimes they're misunderstood. Here's another political. Leonard Skinner, who with the Allman Brothers kind of invented, not knowing they were doing it, kind of invented Southern rock. They played up their Southern roots a lot, right? So, and they used to play with and so did Allman Brothers in a period, but not for long.
Well, you think about the Allman Brothers and the Dixie Dregs, the two most progressive, kind of like sounded like country. It was like they were popular in the North and not in the South, because I guess the South.
Well, that was part of it because they had long hair. And that was anathema down there in that time. But what they did, they wanted to praise their roots. So I don't know if other bands did it, but they were.
I agree on that one there.
Well, you know what? I will say this.
Because it's just not much going on. Nothing's really changed. It's very simplistic on both sides.
But rap, if you listen to the words, and I'm talking about all of them, there are some very talented rap writers out there.
You could say that about all music, but it's a lot of it's just vicious shit.
But
as is rock.
Right now, okay,
it's happening all across the board.
There really isn't rock per se that's brand new. The rock is based on previous times. Rap, hip hop is different than rap. But the big genres, are country right now for white, and then rap or hip hop or some combination with Black America and white America. Not too many black fans of country, not too many black artists in country. Two kinds of country, like I say, outlaw.
Well, I do
and
remember who was the guy back in the '60s, real famous African American country.
Charlie
singer.
Pride.
Charlie
Pride.
Yeah, he just killed it with the country crowd.
Right, and he was. You talk about a unicorn, someone who's kind of alone. That was Charlie Pride, and he had to make. I don't know much of it. Whoa! Did you hear that one?
What happened? You drop your bookshelf or something?
No, that's called thunder.
No,
We're supposed
shit,
to.
that's something.
we're
You really had a. That's right there.
Yeah, it was right there. Yeah. So, if I suddenly start sparking, that's why.
That's one.
Okay, so
You must have your windows open.
no, came right
Really?
through.
That was within about 50 feet of you. Sounds
It
like.
was close. But see, we don't get upset now. You've got new age. Cool. I mean, look at. This stuff is coming up. But basically, what happens so often, I think you look back, most people, at least since the 40s, maybe even a little earlier, like the music of their youth, and that was part of radio too. So you're kind of partial to that. I've said, and I believe this to be true, every song you've ever heard in your lifetime more than 5 times probably becomes a memory of one of those times. We have that, and from youth, and then we kind of say, well, that new music isn't any good. But it's for kids. I mean, K-pop, I don't get it. Okay, but it's huge, and that's their music. And you do have some very talented songwriters out there. New Taylor Swift is extremely. And here's another thing that also irks Trump very much. Many of the big stars today, not only are they minority in terms of birth, Bad Bunny and Hispanic, that's huge right now. Taylor Swift and feminism and women's music, but the women, are kind of dominant now. I mean, think about it. You've got Beyonce, you've got Lady Gaga.
They sell. I mean, that has to be the key. They have to
Well,
sell.
and I mean, that's still there. Now, Brian, you've been experimenting as I've been
Well,
experimenting.
if Beyonce, I mean, if Beyonce hadn't been attractive, what would have happened to her? If she looked like Mama Cass or something like that,
Well, again, I think that has a lot. I mean, look, they've done study after study after study, and they've said this in general. People who are perceived as good looking do better than people who are perceived as ugly. As unfair as that is,
that is what happens. That is what happens.
It is a reality. And as what's going to be interesting is as we get to be more and more a visual society, which is what's happening, I think that may only, increase.
Well, that's why we have so much Botox these days. Isn't that true?
Well, yeah, well,
guys are getting hair
unfortunately-
transplants and women are getting breast.
unfortunately, we are.
Augmentation.
My argument is we're getting to be even more and more superficial. I would love to have a full head of hair that I had, but it's not in the cards. I'm not going to get, I'm not going to do what Donald Trump does, put a beaver on top
Especially
of
as
my
you get
head or
right,
whatever
especially as you get older, it doesn't seem appropriate.
And there's an interesting one.
Less and less important.
The,
Here's a comment
Julie
about
names
jazz.
another artist, a female artist, Pink, who, is, I mean, so at least in that sense, even though, as Brian, as you point out, there's still this idea of attractiveness for female artists. At least we have a lot more than we had. I mean, name me a dominant female artist in that 52 to 59 period, and there are none. There are none. Now, you do start to get them in the 60s, but even there, they're mostly groups. Supremes, Marvelettes, Martha and the Vandellas, then Shangri-La.
Cool, Anthony. Cool, I'm reading straight from the comment. Anthony mentions Mick Jagger. Yeah, well, Mick Jagger's in his 80s now, but you can't. I mean, Anthony, I don't think you can say he wasn't handsome when he was in his 20s. I think women found him cute.
Well, I think
he had kind of like that Joey Brown elastic mouth, but in terms of face, it was
Well, I think
considered attractive.
and it raises an interesting point. Sometimes, sometimes when you get popular, and of course the Stones were extremely popular, all of a sudden, oh yeah, he's pretty good looking. So I mean, even that, it's like a double cycle. if people view you as attractive, you get a better start. But if you get a big start and you're not attractive, all of a sudden, it's also there. And again, it would be interesting. We say today, or I think most people say, if the Beatles and the Stones were playing today, and only the Stones are playing, they would both be anti-Trump. Well, we know for established fact that Keith Richards, true story, once pulled a knife on Donald Trump.
Really?
When, over the Stones were playing in Atlantic City, not at a casino. They were playing at the old convention hall. Trump was putting it on. I guess they got in an argument. Keith just said, "Well, we'll settle it this way." I mean, he didn't stab him.
Right.
But there were enough people in the room to verify. I mean, it sounds like a Keith Richards made up story, but it is true. But
Well,
the
he could have been
Beatles,
joking but put it out, which you don't do.
he wasn't. I don't think so with Keith. But anyway, so we kind of know the Stones. In fact, they have an anti-Trump song on their new LP, which I haven't even listened to. The Beatles were the more established. Like, they were the horrific act that February 9th, 1964. Older people sat there and said, "This is the end of the world." But then when the Stones came along, they said, "Well, the Beatles aren't so bad," and they became accepted. And then but the irony of it is, again, you talk about marketing, which is so much a part of Donald Trump. You talk about image and appearance, which is all of Donald Trump. The Beatles were perceived as like more of the, what should I say, acceptable, and the Stones as the radicals. But actually, the Stones came from families that were much more prosperous than the Beatles. And again, you talk about image, so we are related to Donald Trump. If the Beatles don't have Brian Epstein as their manager, Brian is the one that's put them in. He's the one who put them in the Beatles jackets and ties and kind of made them acceptable. Now, Trump, again, another Trump comparison. Trump we don't know that he listens to anybody but himself. But there's always been talk about a fifth Beatle, and there are many who qualify. But one I think you could make the most legitimate argument for is George Martin, who was their producer. And people don't realize sometimes, and I mean, this is true of a lot. The Beatles got rejected from every record company. And then eventually, when they got to Abbey Road, and Martin said, "There's something in this. Let's work with it." And so not only did he give him that, so you got this idea of Donald Trump. Only I can say, bullshit. Nothing in life has ever been only. Okay, if you want to believe the biblical story of Jesus, he also had not only 12 followers, but 12 people who worked with him, plus some others. Yes, Marty is absolutely right. I don't know if they're I don't know. That's interesting. I could see that as an argument because they are, it's for some people, it's the Beatles, the Stones, and everybody else. I don't see it that way. But I don't know if you remember, Brian, because you're almost, you're not
9
quite a
years younger
decade.
than you.
Yeah, it's almost a decade younger than I. At one point, that was kind of the thing. Are you a Beatles or are you the Stones? It was like a division of the argument. Until now, we're back to Woodstock. Until by Woodstock, by '69, that argument had kind of faded, and they were kind of accepted either way. But that also was a false kind of thing if you look at music itself. I've always said this. I'm not an expert historian, but I've written a lot on it. There really were 4 divisions, not 2. Yes, Beatles and Stones were one, but there was also 2 other groups. One was what I say, Beach Boys and American pop music. That was what was on the radio, all right? And the 4th was soul music. But soul music had 2 huge divisions. One was Motown, we spoke about that earlier, and Barry Gordy's wish was, and it wasn't altruistic, it was money driven, was have black artists be played on equal measure with white artists. They didn't have a white artist on the label until 1968 on Motown, when a band called Rare Earth, and I really like them. I still do.
Yeah, they were good.
They were good. And then of course Motown changed again politically in the 70s when both Marvin Gaye, who had been writing Motown songs since 1962, and little Stevie Wonder, who was no longer the little one he had been, started writing protest music. Temptations did not write their own music, but they started performing things like Papa Was a Rolling Stone, Cloud Nine, um, even the Supremes, as what am I trying to as nightclubby as they were, came out with Love Child, and so I get, the point is that right now, so now wrap this up, coming back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is in a war with music. He's attacked Neil Young. He called Bruce Springsteen prune face, which I thought was interesting. Donald really, if you give me a call, I'm going to tell you, don't pick on people's attributes, because you leave yourself wide open. This week, I don't know if any of you saw it, and we just had a conversation tonight with a friend of ours. We went out to dinner, and I made the comment, and I mean this, but so I said, I don't really like, and you've made it a number of times, Brian, to pick on people's physical
right. We
infirm.
don't do that, unless that they're the ones who do it.
But with Donald Trump, I mean, he makes it almost, you have to do it. And I don't know if you saw the pictures this week or anybody else out there. The caption under it was, "How fucking big is that diaper?" I mean, Brian, it was like it made his butt stick out like this far. So we know, and we know that.
Well, isn't it? I mean, I know there were people his age who have incontinence and all, but what do you think is the reason? Because it's usually kind of early. Usually people are in their 90s now.
Not really. Trust me, I don't have that yet. But
no, I'm sure there could be an accident, but I'm talking about everyday thing,
Well, what I'm saying is, have you ever been in a men's room with about 7 people, all 65 and older, at the urinals? It takes a lot of time.
Right, yeah, it takes a while, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, things change. And, but Donald Trump, of course, which we're going to get to the big subject in a moment with Mr. Trump this week. But Donald Trump wants to cover all that up. Donald Trump, maybe his main problem is he lives in an imaginary world, one that he has created. And so, I mean, the facts, you can see his vanity, you can see his narcissism in, the style, his hairstyle. And again, I will attack him on this. I don't understand it. Arguably, he's rich. He's richer right now than he's ever been, because corruption is a way of life now in the White House on a daily basis. If I had even 1/10 of his money, I would dress better. He's never dressed well. His suits don't fit. His ties are too long. It's like, really? But I think, again, because he lives in this world, it doesn't matter, because if I wear it, it's okay. And people don't tell him. There really is, playing out in Donald Trump's lifetime, a real life version of The Emperor Has No Clothes. And I think that's played out in the business portion of his. Again, in Atlantic City, you can't help but see what Trump didn't accomplish. And we need to pause sometimes and really consider this. We've said it, but it kind of didn't pass. You need to slow down and say, the man destroyed and went into bankruptcy with 3 casinos. That is almost mathematically impossible to do. Almost. And he was able to do that.
With the United States, that's for sure.
Exactly. And it replays again, again, and again. 18 businesses he has established in his lifetime. You know how many have been successful? 0. Trump University, gone. Trump Steaks, gone. Trump Wine, gone. Trump Casinos, gone. And as you say, the tragedy is right now, every day, he is destroying the United States, not only here, but in the opinion of the world. So, Brian, we just got a chance to talk a couple minutes, and you kind of said what your this week's "Why I Hate Trump" motto would be. So, why don't you pick up a little bit on that?
Right, it has to do with that ship.
It involves the sea.
Most people wouldn't consider that a major issue, but this is because now it seems like this thing is becoming a pattern. Because before, with the I don't know which one it was before. That was the Ford or the, I don't know. There's been 2 ships that have had problems, okay, right. And they're both going to have to be relieved. And nobody wants to be at sea for almost an entire year. And now that they're first of all they're in a very very hot area. Now I know it's a nuclear ship, so that they probably have air conditioning, but you can't tell me it's working perfectly. You can't tell me the toilets are working perfectly, and they can't just do all these repairs. So now you're basically, it'd be kind of like, and Dave, I'm doing this as trying to make a point. If Dave were on a cruise, he goes on a 4-day cruise, it's fine. But if the ship gets stuck out there for 3 weeks, he wants to get the hell off that ship, because at some point you don't have the buffet, so you can see what's happening. And then he had the gall, which I'm sure nobody's surprised at. He says, and they mentioned the length of time they're out there. He says it's not long enough. So it's like spitting on somebody's grave in a certain sense. It's just there's no doubt that these sailors have put in a lot of time. They've broken records as far as time that's out there. It's in a very, very hot area out there. I don't care if you have air conditioning or not. You have to have that resupply, and obviously they probably don't get as much as they'd like, because I'm sure the Iranians and the Houthis are trying to find these, resupplying ships for food, because obviously the aircraft carrier can carry a lot of food, but it can't carry all that food for a year. You've got to have replenishment. So they're going to look out for that kind of thing. So it's so difficult for these sailors. And, I think, Dave, you and I probably have the feeling, well, if there are a lot of Trumpers on that ship, you'd probably say, well, you're getting what you deserve. But there are a lot of people who aren't, and you can bet how they're feeling right now.
And I would say this. I'm about as anti-military as a person could be. Having said that, we live in a world where we need our military.
And we needed it in World War II. You have to admit, there are sometimes wars have to be done. Rarely, but they have to be done.
But what I'm saying is, so I've always felt, even during my anti-war protest days, I was never one of the ones greeting veterans coming back from Vietnam as baby killers. It was and still is an individual decision. Do you want to serve in the military or do you don't? And my thing is, no, I don't. But I'm glad, honestly, that some people do, because we do need them. But what I don't like is the hypocrisy of the right, which of course is no longer really, they're not Republicans, okay? They're not even MAGA. They are the worshipers at the altar of Donald Trump. That's where they are. Yep. Judy just points out, look, again, typical of Trump, typical of Hegseth. If we don't say it, it's not true, or if we lie about it, it is true. I do think there's no question that the Trump publicans now, as I'm going to call them from here on out.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Kelly did alliteration, ballrooms, and some other things that he talked about. But again, the Republican Party, up until Trump, usually was categorized as the party supporting our veterans. Now they are the party opposing active veterans, let alone not helping. And I don't know if any of you out there have had family or friends who've had to deal with the VA later. And it's not a reflection on the VA people working. They are tremendously understaffed. They were understaffed 20 years ago. They're still understaffed today, and more so because of the cuts. And that's and that's everywhere, but especially there. So don't be hypocrites and say we support the troops. You don't fucking support the troops. If you did, you would demand Trump's resignation right now.
By the way, Dave,
on that reason.
We're already 2 for 2 on these 2 aircraft carriers. So you get replaced. I forget which one is it, the Washington or something. I don't know. Don't quote me.
I think Lincoln. I don't know. The Lincoln.
Well, this one's the Lincoln, but the one that's going to replace this is the second one this has happened. So what's going to happen? Because you still have to stay there, right, until something is figured. Unless you just let them have everything, and then he's ruined everything. If he lets them have everything, then forget it. It was not only a waste of time, but now it's going to really cost us.
Right.
But it's probably going to happen again, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, well, let's put it like this. As long as the 2 dominant people in the military are Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth in successful. It cannot be. There's a report now. It came out last week that, and you and I have talked about this for the whole time that Trump's been in there. What will the military do? What will it not do? And apparently 80 of the highest ranking generals and other people in the Pentagon said, we're not going. If you put
Now are they going to be able to get
land
the troops now after all this crap in the Navy?
Well, if they do what they did with ICE, yeah.
You're going to give them $100,000 and say,
yeah,
like
it may be. And Judy, your brother is, first of all, he's a hero. I really do believe that. And you don't have to serve in combat to do that. Sometimes you do get caught up. Like were the American soldiers involved in My Lai heroes? No, of course they weren't. But that also, I've never been in war. I've never known that. And a couple of Vietnam veterans came back. They would talk to me, and that was good at Villanova. They actually helped me a lot in terms of understanding. And they said, don't really comment on what you would do or what you wouldn't do until you see your best friend blown to smithereens next to you. Makes an interesting point, right? You don't know. But I think that to me, this is another moment that I think will come back to haunt Trump. I don't see any way out. If anybody else does, please let me know. I don't see any way out of this Iran. I don't. Especially
unless he gives everything up,
and
then that's just as bad as anything else.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm saying any kind of. I should rephrase that. You're absolutely right. I don't see any positive way out.
Right. There's no positive way out of this thing
for America.
Nothing.
So it's and he can spin it all he wants. It's not going to happen. I do want to announce now, if everybody would, Brian, we've been talking about different changes as this summer goes along and into it. I moved some things out of my writing that I'm going to move to this show. Not every show, but I'm going to be focusing on 3 segments that'll be more prepared. Hopefully, most of the time with video or pictures. The first is something I took off of my writing called "The White House Wars," and it's basically Trump's declared war on everything. The Kennedys, America, the Kennedy Center. So talk about that a little bit. On a more personal level. I stole from Bruce Springsteen a title, "My City in Ruins." And the third section, because Trump is bound to say anything, what the hell did he say? And so those of you who are regular watchers of the show, if you have a topic that you'd like us to talk about in those 3 ways, please let me know, because I can research it or do it. Now, just to give you a highlight of what that might mean, okay, let's say the White House wars specifically against the Kennedy Center. I don't know if you saw this past week, there was a vote. Trump now controls 20 of the 23 members on the Kennedy board. And so the vote was 20-3. He's going to put his name back on the Kennedy Center.
We thought it was going to be all for good. And all of a sudden, here we go.
And what he's going to do this time, which I really hope we can stop him, because it's going to be, we'll get it down for there. He is not going to put it up the way he did before, which was lettering. He's going to engrave it into the stone. And once it's etched in stone, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, then you're done. You just knock it off.
Etched in stone. Well, that's why we say that. So that's just one example of something we might talk about from that White House wars. My City in Ruins. Tomorrow, like I said, I just got back late last night. Today, I had some things to do. I'm going to go down and trace. I don't know if everybody's aware of this. Of course, they have this weekend coming up. They have the race around the National Mall. When I left a week ago, they started putting up. Trump has this thing about walls, man. It really does. And so they're actually putting up a wall, Brian, that runs almost all the way from the White House. Well, yeah, almost all the way to Capitol Hill, that will make Pennsylvania Avenue, Independence Avenue, and Constitution Avenue unavailable to the general public. The only way you will get in there, they've printed 250,000 tickets and
Who's paying
distributed
for
them.
this, Dave? You and me?
That would be us.
You and I?
Okay? Yes, that would be us, every American. Now, that's bad enough. Just I mean, so when we go in there, like I've said before, but it bears repeating. My wife, I told her tonight, I said, I'm going in. Do you want to go? And she said, I'll let you know tomorrow. She hates to go in there because it is pure, unadulterated destruction, no matter where you go. And there's one person involved in that, and that's Donald Trump.
Oh, this
Okay.
I don't know, Veg, what you think, but I think Carney's got to be a lot tougher with. I mean, I know he's in a difficult position, but Carney's got to be a lot tougher with Trump. I mean, if I were Canadian, I would push.
Let's put it like this: if anybody thinks that's viable, Trump's idea of making Greenland and Canada the 51st and 52nd state. Speaking of which, too, Veg, did you see this week that he said we're going to make the Strait of Hormuz an American territory? Did you see that? What is it? Yeah. What does that? What? It doesn't matter. Okay.
I mean, he just says it, but he's trying to infuriate people.
Now, again, and then the third category, as I said, so we've got the White House wars, that segment. It might work out. It runs every other, whatever. Then you've got My City in Ruins, talking about that I can be here. I'm not pretending to be a correspondent for Divided We Stand, but I am here. I'm going to take more advantage of being down there. Now, one thing that I'm really fascinated to see how it happens, the flare tent, which has already been destroyed once at Union Station, they did get permission to be on the sidewalk in front of the Pettyman Court, which is a DC district court. So they're there, but they were removed last Sunday. They said you cannot be here until September 1. Why? Because of the race. Because you couldn't get access and to anything. For example, you will not be able to access the following. I'll see more tomorrow. You will not be able to access this weekend the National Gallery, the Hirshhorn Museum, the Native American Museum, Congress, because you'll be inside this barrier that he's putting up that is 250,000 people can. In other words, you have to have the ticket to get in. Now, I've lived in D.C. for 15 years, or again, let me be precise, 3 metro stops from D.C., 4.6 miles from the White House.
By the way, can I interrupt real quick? It's a strange thing, Veg, when I actually have to agree with Doug Ford over Carney, but Doug Ford at least.
Well, I'm not. Well, look,
I'm not a Doug Ford fan, but at least he.
No. But Brian, assuming and certainly I would defer to Veg. I mean, I don't know Canada like Veg knows Canada, but I'm not so sure it's worth dealing with the United States right now.
Well, I would think. Well, why not? I mean, just forget about no alcohol. Don't come down here and just. Don't.
I mean,
the
whatever,
bridge,
right?
You don't get to come over, cut off the electricity to the north or whatever, or just deal with blue states and say that's it.
If you talk to anybody near the Canadian border in the United States, all the way down to Wildwood, which was a huge vacation spot,
right?
Wildwood, New Jersey, for Canadians, down to D.C., which of course attracts. It's some people are saying it's down as much as like 80% tourism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't make that up, right? I mean, if that's 80% of whatever that money was, it's gone. So Canadians, Trump might not see it, and he'll lie about it, but he's there. And then, but back just to finish this part, the last, like I say, segment that'll run on a regular basis is what the hell did he say now? There's no one ever who's mangled the English language like he had. I long for the old days when it was Kofefi. That was actually kind of funny. He meant to say something and he made up a word. Now, it doesn't matter. So basically, you've got him destroying the world. You've got him destroying the Capitol. You've got him destroying our country. You already had him
and our entire ability to think clearly he's destroying, because he's
Well,
inside our
I think,
heads right now.
well, and there'd be something wrong with you if you
Right,
weren't.
if you didn't, but it's so
I mean,
much,
but
it's
it's not good.
exhausting.
No, I agree. Again, I always cite this.
I mean, we
Um,
know he's going to die one day, yeah, but in the
the, the
meantime, I've got to deal with this.
the question is when, how, and how soon. Yeah. Um,
And again, I don't, and I think you agree. We don't want anybody to take him out. We're not
no,
making
we
him a
still won't.
war. No, he wants to
No,
let him take himself out.
yeah. I mean, well, let's think about that just for a moment as the clock winds down. Um, George W. Bush and his initial stand, he was not a real popular president at that point, but his stand on 9/11, most of us would run through a wall for him at that point.
Right.
Okay. And what would happen if a foreign power were like Iran or a terrorist group were to take Donald Trump out? Would he achieve that? Would he achieve that status? And I think he would get enough votes, to secure some things. I don't think he would, I don't know what the percentage was. I think I once read 90% for like a week supported
I think
Bush.
there'd be a different mentality if you had another
Right.
9/11 attack, or you had an attempt on the president that was successful from a country like that,
Yeah.
that's fomented that kind of thing.
But
But if they did attack the country, that's a different thing.
And of course, there are also the unseen things happening that might be happening with any president, but certainly it's going to happen with Donald Trump. I don't know if you've been following the protest in Big Ben, where they're kind of standing
I
up.
know where
a
Big
group of
Ben is.
people.
No, I haven't checked it out there.
But anyway, so it's a National Park Service. And tonight, the gentleman we had dinner with are probably our best friend in the building. He is a retired National Parks. He got it pretty high up, but here in D.C. And we're just talking about, he just got back from kind of a really cool trip in Alaska. He went to places nobody can kind of go. Well, he did go on, like he had to take, for a couple places, he had to take the mail plane because there's no way to reach it. But anyway, we were talking about this, and we spent a lot of time at dinner, since he had just been to it, talking about the topic that kind of got you involved at one point. Certainly saw Sandy and Amir, whether you want to call it global warming, whether you
I
want to call
prefer
it climate
global warming,
change.
because Frank
What?
Luntz is the one who changed it from global warming to climate change, and Frank Luntz is a
Right.
pro-Trump Republican pollster, so the
Right.
hell with him.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Global
What
warming.
it says is, whatever it says it ain't going to be like it is now. Well, this was the hottest summer on record, right?
It will
Across the
be.
nation.
Once they finish it, we finish it.
Right? It's not going to, I mean, yeah, that's not. And Mark, my friend, of course, he's very, he's
Yet it'll
part
be the
scientist.
coolest in the next 10 years.
Well, he was talking about in Alaska, but some other places where, I mean, I don't even think anyone has, how should I say this? Most of us without a science background, and I have one of them, don't even realize how bad it is. Okay. I mean, and I don't mean we're optimistic.
You don't.
I mean,
You know what? Guy McPherson said, he said, why was it that even before the scientists, that people who were very artistic knew that the climate change was real, global warming was real? Because if you are a person with this intuitiveness, this feel, if you can sense it, you know that the winters in Britain, Sunset Lake was frozen in the 50s, and now except
right.
for last year, you just know
You don't
the
have a-
difference.
and I mean, logic dictates. Now I know, you hear people, well, what about cows farting? Okay, I'm sorry. I do not believe cow farts are going to equal the amount of damage automotive using fossil fuel
Right.
does.
Cow farts matter, but it's not.
I mean, yeah. And again, it's, you're, well,
Coal
maybe
is
this
a
is
real
not-
big problem, but Trump seems to keep calling it clean coal. He's twisting words around.
that would be like truthful Trump. It doesn't
Right,
exist.
it
There
doesn't.
is no truthful Trump. There is
But
no
it works
clean
with
coal.
uneducated people, or people who just
Well,
they
you
people
gotta
believe
remember
any
Trump.
kind of shit you tell them. Look, this world is based on kooky beliefs, And I'm not surprised. I mean, we can get that whole
Well,
philosophical
no,
discussion.
the other thing is too, Bri, what happens is, okay, I mean, you could put the Trumpers into categories, okay? There's the haters, and that's a large portion of them. But there's also a very large portion of people who, again, maybe hate is a basis for it, but want to go back, go back to fucking what? Okay, go back to having women not vote. You want to know how close we are to that? Pete Hegseth's minister, and I'm going to go to one of. I mean, I'm vowing to do this, and I'm not. I'm going to go to one of the services where Pete is there. I mean, I assume they let you in. And here, his minister, which he says, I'm Christian, I'm devoted, this is Pete, has said that one of the biggest mistakes in American history was allowing women to vote. They should not be allowed to vote. Now, he's influencing a cabinet member, so is that what they want to go back to? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, and so a lot of these ministers, you can see where they're coming from, because they're the ones that are stripping the congregation.
Well, I mean, again, it's sad because
sickening.
there are. I know you and I differ on this, but I honestly believe this. If you were to divorce all religion, and somebody, as I say this all the time, anybody who's my age remembers, there used to be versions of the King James Bible where all the words that Jesus allegedly said were in red. So, you could look at it just that way. If you were to follow what Jesus said, whether he's God, man, made up, I don't care, myth or legend, you would lead what I would call a good life, good for yourself and good for others. Mm. Very little did Jesus say or attributed to him that was harmful. He was a great teacher. Again, not saying he's real,
And we're not even saying that the ideas he had were new, because there were people with codes before that.
Not saying that. Right. I'm just saying.
No, I agree with you. Yes, if you follow that and you don't do this and that.
Unfortunately, so what's the problem? Unfortunately, it's organized religion is the problem. Okay, and that's the problem. So the idea of it is, I mean, I would charge Pete Hegseth's minister as being more harmful, maybe, than a pedophile Catholic priest in certain ways, right? More damage. And that's part of this. But, when we look at the things...
Well, because because that minister goes after barely legal, and the other one does illegal.
It's just... And, then you come up with the idea of power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. There's some of that out there. And there's a lot of, again, this cult of personality, Brian. People, despite the facts, believe that Donald Trump is successful because he had a successful TV show. He had, the catchwords. Even think about that. You're fired. Is that a nice phrase? I don't think so. How many people want to hear that tomorrow? Not many, right?
Not many, right?
And so even that is based... Anybody who followed that, that's it. Who's he going to fire? And again, I know I've said it, and I kind of believe it's true. But then I look at the stats. He is holding still. If you kind of put all the polls together, and polls are not what they were, he's still holding it 1/3 of the nation. 1/3 of the nation.
Don't you think, Dave, that's never going to change?
If it hasn't changed by now, I don't know what it will.
Right. I mean, there's nothing. It's like with that Joe Arpaio. He still was going to get 48% of the vote. You know what I mean? He's a sick fuck.
And but
I guess what we're doing is we're giving people too much credit. Human beings can be just absolutely vicious,
and have always been.
I mean, I know it's a trite thing to say, but it's just
no, it's not trite, Brian. It's what the power structure of America prior to Trump has been able to do is convince...
I'm looking up. I'm sorry. I haven't looked anything up. I don't know. I was actually texting with Joey here.
Okay. But what happens is, the American power structure has done a great job of glorifying the founding fathers. Now, you can say without them, we wouldn't have a country. But I will say that they were not good from day one. and they set a tone that is still there today. For example, here's something people don't realize, and it's a fact. Look it up. Okay, the American Revolution really started in New England, specifically Massachusetts. Okay, with Sam Adams and Paul Revere, who didn't make the ride. But anyway, but when they decided to make it nationwide, so they were doing a pretty good job of battling the British on their own. I mean, they couldn't have won, right? But I mean, they were winning against those because they were using different tactics. They weren't marching in line like the Redcoats did, etc. And the Continental Congress named George Washington as the commander-in-chief. Do you know what his first order was when he got to New England? Any idea?
No.
There were many freed blacks and enslaved blacks fighting side by side with the Massachusetts Minutemen. His first order was, we will have no blacks in the military. That was his priority. Father of a country, yeah. Don't forget, slaveholder. And he had, when a few slaves escaped, he spent his whole career trying to get them back. Now, we can sit here and say, well, no. Look, if you can't, I don't care what kind of person you are, if you can't realize that enslaving another human being for any reason is wrong at any time in history, there is something deficient in your character.
A person has a right to their own body. It's as simple as that.
Right.
Okay? And mind. All together. And everybody has that right.
And you move through, I'm picking on race because it's one of the big themes. America has been, and unless we have some kind of revolution, spiritual, mental, intellectual revolution, will continue to be a racist nation. It's just true. Now, do I like that? No. Do I accept, do I say it's because of me it's racist? No. But it is racist. It is. I mean, prove it. Nobody can prove it to me yet that it isn't. All the way up to Abraham Lincoln. There used to be a saying that in a black home you had a picture of Martin Luther King, you had a picture of JFK, and you had a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And yes, he did free the slaves. There's no question. But two things about that: he did not free the slaves because he believed in freedom, although he talked about that. That was bullshit. He freed the slaves for a number of reasons. One was he needed to energize the abolitionist movement to continue the war. George McClellan, who was a general, ran as a Democrat. He was ready to reunite with the South and allow them to have slaves if they'd come back in the Union. So he also wanted to put a scare into the Confederate States of, if they're free, maybe there'd be a slave revolt.
I go back, Dave, to Russia, though, because I know Lincoln wrote a letter discussing, the importance of the Civil War, because he said,
right.
Who are we as a country? Because remember, Russia freed the serfs prior to
we were one of the last nations. England freed their slaves before.
Well, there's still a few nations in the Middle East that still have slavery, and
right.
There's more slavery that came out of the Middle East in terms of numbers. So if there are reparations, we're going to have to not only look in this country, but from the Middle Eastern countries that enslaved. But that's another story. But he said that, like Russia at that time, and we have to think this is a completely different time, the 1860s.
Right.
Russia was looked as a despotic, autocratic nation ruled by a czar that was, had a heavy fist, and they had serfs. Now, a serf and a slave are slightly different, but nobody would want to be a serf.
I do think that's
But it didn't look good in terms of the world, and they had to stop serfdom, and they did. Like 1860, they did.
Right.
But anyway, Lincoln was quite aware of that, and you have a country that's growing like the United States, and here they still have slavery. You know what I mean?
Well, and the other thing is, and this is not, I honestly have not been, they redid the underneath part of the Lincoln Memorial, just opened about a month ago. I haven't been there yet, but in the old one, there was excerpt of a position, kind of equivalent today of a position paper, and Lincoln wrote, and he honestly did not believe that the nation could accommodate blacks and whites. And his solution was to return as free men to return African Americans to their native
Which would have
land.
been the biggest mistake in terms of this country. If this country it was
Oh.
without minorities in general, this country wouldn't have gotten. I mean, we've already mentioned this, that just even through slavery, if it wasn't through slavery, this country got from A to B pretty quickly economically. You can do a lot of things with slavery, you know what I mean, in terms of economic movement. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying it's when you have free labor, it's quite different.
And for anyone, and I don't think any of our viewers would ever do this, but if anyone doesn't believe it's still there, Donald Trump's first public act was working with his father, and his father refused to rent or sell to African Americans, Fred Trump. Fred Trump also associated with, if he wasn't, the KKK members, and Fred Trump also attended what was then the largest Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden in America's history. So that's, so we can't, I mean, Trump is, it doesn't matter whether he's a classist, meaning he, or hates poor people, but I think over and beyond that, I feel safe in labeling him for his actions as a racist. So this idea is, and if you believe, as I do, that America has some original sin, stealing from the Bibles, two of those are slavery, and the other is the genocide of the indigenous people. And it's interesting how, the stories have been changed. The South lives with the, they teach. My kids go to school. Well, it's a private school, but the kids who go to public school in Alabama, you are taught it was not a war over slavery. It was a war over states' rights. Cover up. Anyway.
Cover up, absolute cover up.
The clock on the wall says it's that time. So,
yeah,
Brian,
Dave.
I'm going to let you go first. And remember, everyone who isn't familiar with anybody new, we always kind of end the show this way. Each of us expresses whether we're more or less optimistic this week than we were last week. And remember, that does not mean that's comparing.
We're optimistic. That sense, I'll say that I am more optimistic, but I'm not optimistic. But I am more optimistic because when the military has a problem where you have a large group of men and you can't get people to, join up anymore, that happened in World War I with the Russians, and that was led to the downfall. And with only 8,000 or whatever, 20,000, I forget it was, the Red Army, a lot of bad things happen when nobody wants to join the military. So you have more of these ship events. And then if more and more news comes out, especially from the parents, be like parents complaining in school, I think you're going to see an incredible backlash against the military. And the military cannot afford it. Even in the days of AI, they can't afford it because, we'll just keep losing.
I would agree with you, except I read some article. Maybe I shouldn't read articles right this week that made very valid points about what Trump may, because we don't know what he may do to stop the midterm elections, taint them, or in some way damage. And I used to be the optimist, not the optimist, but more optimist. I'm going to say until we actually figure out, we know we can stop him with that. We'll know in how many days now? I mean, it's not that long,
60
right?
60 some or something like that.
Now, where I do come back to the optimism is yours, though. I would think, and again, I've never been in the military. I've talked to numerous people, obviously my father and people who've been in there. I would think it would be pretty hard now if Trump were to give some bogus order to involve the U.S. military against the Constitution to take action in American election. I would hope, and I think they might say, no, we ain't going to do that.
I hope
more so now. No, more so now.
Well, they tell him, you lead the way, Donald, and then we'll go behind.
Well, what I mean by this, it's one thing if the report from the one ship was, my God, we've never lived this way. They're so grateful. The president is so grateful that he sent the best food,
Yeah.
or
and meanwhile, that ship is returning. You know what I mean? It's not going to be out there now.
No, but again, you know, there's just moments, and Trump has a number of these, but this is another moment I don't understand unless you don't believe it. With Hegseth has said, it's not as bad, and Trump's actual words when asked, he said, they haven't been out there long enough. Right then,
What an asshole.
at that moment, if
doesn't
for no other reason, if you had loved Donald Trump as much as you loved your first child, to say that, you'd have to deny either that he said it, but it's recorded, or that he didn't mean it, or that he was no. That's, I mean, it is
without a filter, so he had to mean it.
Oh, he means it, or he doesn't. What he say, it doesn't matter whether he knows what he's saying or not. He's the president of the United States. I mean, what he says is either good for America or bad for America.
He's got to put his name on it.
Find me one statement, just one, who I could say that is good for America. It isn't. And when you talked about, not acknowledging or not, without immigrants, we do not exist. We're not birthing enough babies. That is, true. And
he is letting some in, but that's the states that need to farm.
Whites from South Africa. Okay, that's the only group. Seriously, that's the only group that has been given group dispensation to come here.
Well, I know there's still pressure, like in areas of Texas or I forget where they're telling him we still need a lot of immigrants for the fields and all that kind of thing. So,
well, I mean, you want
quietly letting some people go in some areas.
One of the reasons, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons that our food costs are going up is fields are not being picked. There's nobody to pick them. Do you see? I mean, again, it's entitlement. I don't like saying this, but I think it is true. Most white people think some jobs are beneath them. Okay. And many of those are the jobs that immigrants, in particular, immigrants from Mexico, Latin America, and South America perform. And they use it as a way, hopefully, to rise. And if anyone wants to know what a rising Hispanic community looks like, I would encourage them to look at my former community and your community in Richmond. It is, whatever it becomes, it will be what a basically Latino, Hispanic, Chicano city will be. ICE is there now. It's everywhere. Back now to the election closing here, but I know I've talked to enough people here, not a complete survey, but enough in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. There many Latino, Hispanic, Chicano people are altering what they do out of fear of being picked up by ICE. And so, ICE is just, if he's not stopped, it's going to spread. He's already looking at some laws with his new, butt buddy there, new DOJ head, of classifying anti-American remarks, which of course will be anti-Trump remarks, right?
Right.
As stiffer penalties. Look, he's looking, what a loser. He's looking at re-indicting, or trying to re-indict the former Olympian, for what we all know is a bogus thing, and even his own hand-picked judge said was bogus. And hopefully the Supreme Court will disallow that. But again, my last comment, unfortunately, this is where we stand now. Donald Trump should not be president of the United States. End of story.
All right, let's leave it at that, folks. We'll see you next week or sooner, depending on what happens. Something big happens, we'll be on. And the way
Sounds
things
good.
are going. Okay, Dave. See you, Dave. Take
Yeah,
care.
and thanks everyone for watching, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on Memorex or whatever. Right.